everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, based on where you're joining us from. My name is Arpit Chaturvedi. Today, what I'm here to talk to you about are essentially two things. Number one is how to build and maintain careers in the field of public policy. And when I say public policy, I also include public policy, diplomacy, sustainability, politics, all of those careers. And I'm sure that, a lot of you hope to build careers in this field. And the second thing that I want to talk to you about is the GPOTS Fellowship, the Global Policy, Diplomacy and Sustainability Fellowship, and how it would help you in building such careers. So before we begin, since we are only a few people over here, we could just do a very small round of introductions. I'm going to call upon you. And if you could then unmute yourself, tell us where you're joining us from, what sort of career interests you have in the field of policy, diplomacy, or sustainability, and what are you doing right now. So I'll start with myself. So my name is Arpit Chaturvedi. I head a think tank called Global Policy Insights. We are there in 3 countries, in India and UK and the US. And I also serve as the joint director for the GPOTS Fellowship. I graduated back in 2018 with an MPA degree from Cornell University, after which I taught at the San Francisco State University. I taught a master's level program in public administration, and I taught a subject called Comparative Perspectives in Public Service. After which I also was in the founding faculty team of the Indian School of Public Policy. I also served as the academic coordinator over there. And thereafter, I currently serve as an advisor at the Kiev School of Diplomatic Arts in Ukraine. And also I teach, my comparative public administration course at various places, including at the GPOTS Fellowship. So that's me. It's nice to see you all and meet you all over here. I'm sure that we all are gathered over here to learn something about how do we build careers in public policy. And I absolutely encourage you and empathize with you for taking on such an important and such a challenging career in front of you. So I'm going to first call upon Anesu, who's here with us. So Anesu, if you could quickly introduce yourself.
Okay, hello, can you hear me clearly?
Yes, I can.
Okay, my name is Anesu Zandima. I am a student at Stellenbosch University in South Africa. I'm studying my undergraduate degree in, it's a BSc in Earth Science, and I hope to study a postgraduate diploma in environmental management. So I saw this opportunity to gain insight into what the world and career of policy making is about, because that's where I see myself going for real change to take place. I want to be a part of that, and that's what I want to do.
Absolutely. Well, you've come to the right place, Anesu, and we've had mentors from Stellenbosch University at the fellowship as well. So, and a lot of what I'm going to be talking about fits very well the Indian, African, and the Latin American context today, South Asian, Latin American and African context over here. So I do believe that you might find what we're going to be talking about very useful. Okay, let me call upon Misha. If you can hear us and if you can unmute yourself. All right, not sure if Misha can do that right now. Let me see if Aditya Vikram, if you're able to do that. Okay, not Misha, not Aditya Vikram. Let's see who else is here. Deepanshi, I see you. Deepanshi, if you could introduce yourself to us.
So, hello everyone. Hello, Apit. So, currently I'm a freelancer. I'm working as an academic writer and I'm prepared for masters. Okay. And I have done my bachelor's in anthropology from Amity University, which is quite awesome. Related to public policy and diplomacy.
Absolutely.
So
in Noida.
Right. Like my t-shirt. And so I want to do my master's in health sciences, basically in genetics and epidemiology, but I want to learn about public policy and diplomacy to connect with these health sciences and to promote good diplomacy and policies in Indian government and want to study about how to
Absolutely.
implement
And
good.
health is going to
Yeah.
be, I think it already is one of the top agendas for the Indian government, and it is going to
Yes.
remain so for the world for many decades to come from now. So you are in the absolute right focus area over there,
Thank
Deepanshi.
you.
Okay, I see Karthik over here has written to us. Okay, Karthik is out right now. He's from Jindal Global University, Sonipat, where I was delivering a lecture only yesterday. Okay, thanks, Karthik, for joining us. Okay, let me see if who else is here. Manik, are you able to unmute yourself?
Yeah, am I audible?
Yes, you are. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, my name is Manik. I'm joining from Delhi. Currently, I'm pursuing my master's in global studies. I've
Awesome.
done my bachelor's in political science honors. So, like, brief introduction about this public policy. Like, it's been my subject from an open university. I also did master's in public administration.
Oh,
From
nice.
so, plus also public policy is a part of political science,
Yes.
and I'm much inclined towards public policy and diplomacy because I'm studying global studies, which like a broader sense of international relation discipline.
Certainly.
So
Oh,
yeah,
certainly. I think, again, one thing that our fellowship focuses a lot on is the interconnection between public policy and diplomacy. And for example, health policy is a great example, or environmental policy is a great example, where it's a policy issue, but it's also a diplomatic issue across the world. So thank you so much for joining us, Manik. Yeah. Let me see. Leah, if you're able to unmute yourself.
Yes, I am, sir. Thank you very much. My name is Leah, and I am a scholarship PhD candidate in law and political science at the School of Law of Ulster University. And as you can tell from the accent, I am from Northern Ireland. And I'm very interested in exploring further with my academic research into public policy around international human rights compliance and development of sort of constitutional mechanisms, particularly in the context of minority and cultural rights.
Awesome.
And I completed the Washington Ireland programme last year, which really inspired me to consider more the diplomatic route. And I was very fortunate to be accepted onto UNITAR's Global Diplomacy Initiative for the next while. So I'm really hoping to see where else I can go with that and explore my avenues into public policy.
Awesome. I'm so impressed by all of the things that you're doing. And I'm sure you would really enjoy the discussion today and might also have something to add basis your experience so far. So looking forward to discussing this stuff with you. Okay, let me go over to Albert. Albert, if you're able to unmute yourself.
Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Yes, so my name is Albert Kure. I do two things for work. First is that I am the regional coordinator for West Africa for an organization called Thought for Food Foundation. And then I work as special assistant to a governor in Nigeria. So I do have some public policy experience in terms of subnational policies,
Awesome.
but I was looking towards expanding towards the multinational angle of public policy. And so I started a master's in food security policy at the University College Cork. So I'm doing that for 1 year, and then that then allows me to expand into a wider range of intergovernmental and public policy topics that relate to food security. So I recently got included into the board for CropLife International's Youth Sounding Board. And so that allows me now to engage on like the UN level and all other multinational engagements about food security from the crop and biotech perspective. So I do have a master's in biochemistry as well. So that kind of is the context for that.
Super, super impressive, Albert. And thank you so much for joining us. In fact, I think you're on a great track over there. And we also share something in common, which is, we have worked with subnational governments, and some of the examples I'm going to share today might be of some value to you, and you might want to add to them as well. Okay, let me quickly get Abraham.
Yes, thank you. Good evening to all. I'm Abraham Modi from Arunachal, India. I'm a lecturer in a college, have graduates in pole science, and I will teach public administration in my colleges, so I have joined this session. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us, Ibrahim. Such a pleasure to have you with us. Let me try and get Robert, if you're able to unmute yourself. Okay. Robert is probably not able to do that. Let me get Manik. Okay, if not Manik. Okay, Manik, go ahead.
No, I have done it already, if I guess.
Okay, sorry. The names just keep flipping on the screen. So, all right, Duena.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, you are. Hi, we can also see you. Thank you so much.
So I'm a student of Masters in Public Policy from St. Xavier's College. I've also done my bachelor's in Political Science from the same college. So since studying public policy, I've been studying a lot of phenomena to the policy, like foreign policy, diplomacy, urban policy. So through this session, I hope to relate my career choices with relating policy to reality. And I believe that a major chunk of policy comes in implementation and evaluation. So I believe that that is something that I can work through and like bring about a small change, even that's even possible for my country, then that'll be great. Yeah. Thank you.
Absolutely. I think, you are just at the right stage to be attending a discussion like this. So thank you so much. And I would really appreciate if some of us who've been able to turn their cameras on, keep their cameras on, because it just makes it a lot more interactive. We are not going to get theoretical today, maybe just a little, but not quite a lot. So it's going to be very conversational. Okay. And let me just get Sumit, and after that we start. So Sumit, if you're able to unmute yourself. Okay. All right. So if not, then, maybe whenever we are free in between, and if we can, let's just do the intros, but I'm going to jump right into the topic over here. So just let me know if you are able to see my screen, everybody.
Yes,
Perfect.
it's visible.
Perfect. Okay. So here's the thing. The reason why I designed this presentation is because I see way too many people in the sphere of public policy, diplomacy, and sustainability having very fuzzy career aspirations, having extremely fuzzy ideas about what their next steps should be, and extremely fuzzy ideas about how a public policy career looks like. What I'm not going to do is give you a laundry list of jobs that are available in the policy domain. That's what, a general career discussion tells you. But that I'm sure you can just go on any job website and figure out what sort of jobs are available for public policy students or practitioners. What I'm going to tell you over here about is really, you could read the title over here alternatively as how not to be a starving public policy practitioner. Because a lot of times what I've seen is that, and it pains me to no end that somebody who graduates with a public policy degree finds it's really, really hard to find a job, finds it's really, really hard to find a job that pays enough. Or a lot of times I see public policy people working in jobs that might pay them, to make their ends meet, but they're not doing something which really, really interests them. So the idea over here is, to bring about certain mindsets and talk to you about certain experiences, my experiences and others' experiences backed by research on figuring out how not to have, a public policy career, which is extremely high on idealism, but low on, practical financial viability and things like that. All right. And I'm going to, give you some anecdotes, some research, and, some cliched terms, but that would help you, understand these ideas that I'm going to tell you in a much more clearer manner. Okay. So number one is that you need to understand, to begin with, that a career in public policy, the overall landscape of public policy, careers looks something like this to begin with. I'm going to make a slight modification to this model, but to begin with, to understand this model, you need to look at the whole of the public policy career as a pyramid. And what do I mean by a pyramid? It has various layers. So at the top layer, you have, the really well-known legislators, ministers, their advisors, or there are renowned philosophers, public intellectuals, people who are leading the World Bank, people who are in the top echelons of the UN or other developmental agencies or international groups. So that's like the top tier over there. Okay. The next in line are the people who are supporting the top tier. So, these folks over here, they are usually playing a support function to the top tier. So these could be executive assistants, consultants in Government of India, what are also called officers on special duties for ministers, heads of, think tanks, even medium to small think tanks, and basically all of the people who are supporting these bigwigs. So these are the folks, who are waiting their turn to be called upon to move from this level to this level. And for doing that, they are writing a lot of op-eds, they are giving a lot of interviews, they are building their profile in a manner that when called upon to join this league, they leave behind a great track record that makes them desirable and eligible to join this league over here, right? And then, beneath them are your analysts, your consultants, your managers. These are usually folks who have, public policy degrees or, some sort of degrees plus experience in the field of public policy. They could be junior level analysts or junior to mid-level managers or consultants. Typically in a year, you'd see that, there would be some years or sometimes in the year where they have a lot of work. They're extremely busy. At other times of the year, they are probably not doing much. A lot of times, their work could be seasonal. A lot of times their work could be extremely, stable and busy. So this is the group which is really finding its footing and has gotten an opening, has gotten a break. But eventually they are waiting that, through their networks, connections, through showcasing their competence, they can reach this tier, okay, and really start supporting people who are over here. And, they are usually trying to get in touch with people in this tier so that they can pull them up from here to here, okay? Now, beneath them is a huge sea of people who are, who don't even know how to find a meaningful career or even a job in public policy. These are the folks who say that, how do you even get paid in this field of public policy? And it's all right if a lot of us find ourselves to be over here or over here. That's completely fine. The thing is that there are ways we are going to talk about which helps you move from one level of this pyramid to another level. All right. And just to correct the analogy of the pyramid, you also have to keep in mind that it is not really a pyramid. The pyramid, I always start with that because that's just an easier model to fit in your mind. But in reality, if you see, it is a snakes and ladders game. There are umpteen number of ministers, umpteen number of high flying executives in the world who have now retired, or now their party is out of power, or they were famous advisors, but now they have done their duty, they are retired, etc., and nobody even recognizes them anymore. There's just a lot of them. So they came somewhere over here, and then from there, maybe they got bit by a snake, and then they are over here. They cannot even intern. They cannot even do a regular job that gives them enough money. And if they haven't really invested their money, and if they haven't really, built mechanisms to support themselves financially, if they were not in a job that gives them a good pension, or if they haven't made the right investments, they can find themselves perpetually stuck at the middle of this, snakes and ladder with, really, really no way to come up again. There are always ways, but it is always a lot more frustrating once you've come from above and you have to, play the game all over again. Okay. So the idea being that you can already think that people over here would be extremely, extremely insecure in many ways, extremely, distrustful, because if they back the wrong advisor, or if they do something which is unbecoming of their position, they can easily come down the ladder and always forever get stuck over here. Which is not to say that people over here, the insults, the interns, the younger consultants, etc., have it easy. But the thing is that they still haven't lost much, and they have a lot to look forward to. So the real way of looking at the policy career is something like this. In fact, in India, I give this example for those who are familiar with Bollywood. The whole career scenario is much like Bollywood, that there are some folks who are like the Shah Rukh Khans or the Aishwarya Rais or the Amitabh Bachchans, who are very well known, who are at the top of the ladder. And then there are so many folks jumping into this career, into this ocean of public policy thinkers, practitioners, advisors, who don't even know how to earn, bread out of this, because they were inspired by a Barack Obama, or, a Modi, or, a Rahul Gandhi, or whoever. And they jumped into this, or a Shashi Tharoor, they jumped into this thinking that they will reach here. But somewhere over here, they fail to figure out that how do I even sustain myself? And especially, when you start entering the middle of your career, you start having a family, or you start having other financial obligations, then people find it really, really hard to stick to a career of public policy, because they don't know where to go from there. They don't know how to monetize their experience, their expertise, etc., etc. And today my talk is really about figuring that out, partly from experience and partly from anecdotes, partly from research. All right. Okay. So the hard truth of this career is that no matter how bright your ideas are, and I can imagine that if we are students and, when we graduate, I remember when I graduated from Cornell, I considered myself as a gift to the universe, and considered myself as a person who is now qualified to be advising over ministers and bureaucrats, and, writing articles and fixing the world. And, I pretty quickly realized that it's not going to be that easy. The unfortunate part is that, ideas are probably the most useful things to change things on the ground in reality, but they are the things which are also the least in demand. Why do I say that? That might sound cynical to you. Why do I say that? The reason is that so many people have so many different types of ideas floating around, that it is extremely, extremely difficult to establish your legitimacy. And it is extremely, extremely difficult for people who are in positions to make decisions to differentiate between a credible idea and a non-credible idea. And a lot of times good ideas can still not be implemented, because the system is geared in a way that no matter how good your idea is on paper, its implementation would be extremely hard because of resources, because of bureaucratic structures, etc., etc. So ideally, whenever you're coming up with ideas, you also need to think about it's really good as an idea if it can be implemented easily. Okay, but typically the challenge is that no matter how brilliant your ideas are, you're probably not going to be taken at face value initially, at least. Okay. So how do you build legitimacy in this field? How do you build yourself to a position where your ideas are taken seriously in this field. And I'd say that there are 3 E's to it, and they stem from the research on legitimacy. Any sort of institution, any sort of law, any sort of rule is considered legitimate in a society when it goes through a very rigorous path of procedural justice. What do I mean by that? So the research says that legitimacy is directly linked to procedural justice. The meaning of that is that if you have gone through various rites of fire, if you've gone through various well-designed procedures to reach a particular level, and then you are coming out in the market, you are considered legitimate. Think of an award. Think of the Nobel Prize. These days, the Nobel prizes are being given out. Now, the Nobel Prize has a very elaborate structure. People are, first selected as nominees. There are various academies and various individuals who are eminent. They are given, the honor to, nominate people for the Nobel Prize. And then there are groups who would evaluate that nomination. They would appoint investigators who would evaluate those nominations. Then there will be a reading of the works of the people who are nominated. Then there is going to be, voting on all of these folks who are nominated, and then, a decision by consensus. And there's a whole elaborate procedure related to, why somebody gets a Nobel Prize. And the reason, and it takes over an year. The whole nomination to award process takes over an year to complete. And the reason why they have such an elaborate procedure, and the reason why they make that procedure public, is because without that, the Nobel Prize would have no legitimacy. So any sort of legitimacy comes through, procedural justice. If people believe in the correctness of the procedure and the rigor of the procedure through which you've come, you will have legitimacy. Now, the challenge is that, it depends on what is considered legitimate in various societies. Typically, these are the 3 E's. So education in a particular field, that is considered, a good marker of legitimacy. Experience in a particular field is considered a good mark of legitimacy. And exposure, which means that how frequently are your opinions visible, are your opinions and analysis accessible to people. So that's why you see a lot of journalists who may not be trained in public policy, who may not have any experience of making or contributing to public policies, would still be nominated to occupy important positions in the government or in institutions, because there's disproportionate exposure that they get because of their hold on the mass media. And then the other thing also is that different cultures accord different weights to the 3 E's. So, for example, in India, the greatest focus is on experience. If you're a bureaucrat who has, a good 10 years of experience in the field of public policy, that to government experience has a lot of legitimacy. Then, people who are in the decision-making positions are most likely to hear you and, to take your work seriously. If you are in the field of, you could be a PhD from Stanford or from Cornell, but if you are giving some advice, and on the other hand, there's a bureaucrat who's giving an advice, and that bureaucrat has spent a good 10 years into that field, the bureaucrat might be given a lot more weightage than you. Okay, and then there are cultures which go a lot more behind the celebrity value or the familiarity value of behind a particular person. So that's the reason why you see so many actors who turn into politicians finding legitimacy. That's why you see people who are journalists exposed to the media, etc., find easy legitimacy. And it depends from institution to institution, person to person, and culture to culture. But ideally, what you should aim for is to have a little bit of all 3, that getting experience under your belt, getting exposure, and getting the right education in the field. Okay, but you have to be very cognizant that what is valued most in your culture. And let us say the greatest value, for example, India might look something like this, that there's a 0.5 weightage to this, there's probably a 0.3 weightage to this, and there's probably a 0.2 weightage to this. So what if you're not a celebrity and you don't have experience? What if you're an academic? Okay, then if you're an academic and you want to be taken seriously, then your level of academic work should be so high that it compensates for some of this. Okay, or you mix your strategy with a little bit of experience and exposure to take your overall points up. Okay, so that's the first principle that I'm going to talk about over here is that thou shalt build legitimacy as a professional in the public policy field. That should be the first thing that you should be going after, which is to build your legitimacy through education, through experience, and through greater exposure. And that's why I always recommend to folks who are in the public policy field to write and write a lot, or to make videos, or to speak in conferences, or to host conferences. And as a matter of fact, what we do at our fellowship program also is that we have a policy writing and communications lab where we help you. We first don't allow you to write. We first insist that you edit a lot of pieces, you analyze a lot of article structures, and then you get to writing policy memos, then you get to write policy analysis pieces, then you get to write policy op-eds, and then we also are always happy to help you get published on the websites of various think tanks or news outlets, etc., etc. Okay, so all of these things are really, really important. Okay, now the other thing, and this is especially true about the Indian culture, but I believe that all developing countries' culture is that we operate in a low trust environment, and the consumer behavior professionals. So all of the folks who work in branding, all of the folks who work in the field of selling consumer goods like food items or like your t-shirts, etc. They know this, that we live in a low trust culture. And that's the reason why, and especially in countries like India, we are high on time and low on money, and we are typically low on trust between each other. So that's the reason why a new brand, when it comes in India, and the sort of advertisements that we see on the television, they realized a long time back that there's no benefit in just telling the features of the brand, because there's no benefit in telling that, okay, this brand is going to help you in this way. This is going to, address your needs because of features X, Y, and Z. It's not useful because people just won't believe you. Okay. So what do the brands do? The brands don't talk about the features at all. If you look at the advertisements on the television or on the radio, etc., you would find advertisements who are trying to build a psychological connect with you. So you'd find Cadbury chocolates trying to, and you're going to find more of those advertisements as we approach Diwali, where Cadbury chocolate is going to, put up ads showing, 2-3 young folks living somewhere outside of their home, and then in an act of kindness, their landlord or, their teacher would give them a Cadbury chocolate over a celebration, essentially triggering psychological needs of connections over there. Or you would find advertisements where, a person comes out of their house wearing a white shirt and then looks at another neighbor whose shirt is whiter than his or her shirt and thinks that, okay, how is the other person's shirt cleaner or whiter than mine? So they are triggering that sort of, comparison and psychological competition. So they're not talking about the features directly. They're first, giving a lot of psychological stimulus. And that is a lesson that I heard, that I learned a very hard way when I was sitting with a particular minister in a state government where we had gone as a think tank to talk about certain health policy issues. So this was the health minister in a particular state. And you'd find this anecdote really interesting. So what happens is that, after a lot of effort, we got this appointment with the minister. And one favorite policy of ours is the geriatric policy. We are trying to tell the ministers that in India, we are 8.5% youth as a population, 8.5% senior citizens as a population right now. But by 2050, which is 30 years down the line, we'd be 20% senior citizens in India. So a fifth of our population would be senior citizens, which means folks of our age. We are going to be the largest pool of senior citizens in our country and in probably any country, maybe after China, but one of the largest generations of senior citizens, and we are not going to be the richest one. And we don't have a ministry that deals with elderly affairs. We have a youth ministry over here in India. And what we are pushing for is that some state government comes up with a ministry of senior citizens over here in India. And that was the idea that I, went to a particular minister in a state government to convince them of something like that. And obviously, the minister was just being buzzed around by various calls and various petitions all of the day. So the attention span of that minister was really, really low. So I sit with this guy and he tells me that, the policies you're talking about, they really work in the US. They don't work over here. I was like, okay. Then I started giving him statistics, trying to convince him why we should not wake up in 2040 when we already have a sizable population of senior citizens, and why we should wake up right now. But what I learned was that, he gave me replies such as, you go to a village with me right now and I'll show you how elderly people are, they can run faster than you and I. So totally bullshit reasons. And what I realized was that, statistics is not going to convince this guy. I talked about some further ideas, and likewise, one after the other, these ideas did not work. And he was meeting people in between while I was sitting there. So one petitioner came from a particular, small town over there. And that petitioner told him that, my mother got bit by a monkey yesterday, and I went to the district hospital and I could not find, the rabies injection over there. And because they said that there's no injection which is available at that point of time. And then somebody nudged me, from aside and, took me to a side and said that you go to that other place and you'll find that injection. You'll have to pay double the price, but you'll find it. So essentially he was saying that he was insinuating that there could be a black marketing going on for these injections. Okay. So the minister got furious. He called the chief medical officer for that district, and the chief medical officer said that it's complete lies. We have enough stocks of all medicine, all injections, etc., etc. And then the minister got furious on the guy who had come as a petitioner, and he told the petitioner that, do you know that you don't have to go to the district hospital to get such injections? You have to go to the community health centers, etc., etc. And this guy was like, no, I did not know. I'm sorry. So at that point of time, I thought that I should probably jump in, because I was also looking to get some projects. And, as a think tank, you need to have projects to be able to, fund your salaries and, keep your organization going. So I thought that, for a moment, I'll jump in again into the conversation and I will tell the minister that it is not, that poor person's responsibility to know what medicines or injections are available where. It should be the ministry's responsibility to communicate it effectively enough. And we have communication programs, but they are never evaluated. So we need to have evaluations for those communication programs, and we need to have communication programs so that people know that, where to go for what. But I checked myself. I stopped. I did not jump in with my advice, because I knew that that advice is not going to stick. I knew that the first thing that I should do, and since then, what I do is that when I'm meeting bureaucrats, when I'm meeting ministers, when I'm meeting decision makers, I don't talk about work in my first meeting at all, in my first few meetings at all. And the reason why that is important is that we need to build trust first. It's like, again, those advertising companies, those advertisers who would not tell about the features of products, they would, create a brand association. This works very well in developing countries. Even in the Middle East, and even in Eastern countries, the thing is that you don't talk business, you don't talk work in the first few meetings. You first, create brand recognition. You first create that psychological trust before you jump into discussing work. And it could be totally opposite from, how it happens in Europe or in the US or in the more developed economies. I was reading, Elon Musk's biography, where the biographer mentions this incident where, a marketeer or some company's head came to Elon Musk trying to sell some technology to Tesla. And he met Musk, and Musk asked him that, okay, why are we meeting over here? And he said that I'm here to first build a relationship before we get into any business. And Musk shook his hand, said goodbye, and he said, it was nice to meet you. And the business did not happen, because if you're in a high trust country, you sort of realize that, and people in the US don't think it's a high trust country. My experience was that it's still much higher trust than, some of our countries over here, even though the level of high trust in the US is also evading over time. There's no denying that. So you would have to be conscious of the degree to which trust exists in a particular country. So it's maybe not as high as it used to be. So you have to build relations in the US as well as, jump very quickly to work and product features. But typically it is a good practice to build trust first. Okay, so you can tell people that, okay, these are the things that I usually work on. This is what I'm interested in doing. But initially, just build relations and don't jump right into, giving your, pristine advice to people. So really, really important to know this. All right. So the other thing is, in fact, that should probably be your second principle. In fact, I'm going to elaborate on this second principle a little more by saying that, thou shalt build your brand. It is a little different from saying that, you should build legitimacy, because legitimacy comes from the actual work that you do. When I say that you shall build your brand, I mean more by you should build a solid brand personality. If you are to build trust and, thinking again like, private sector brands, as they stimulate a sort of psychological affinity. Okay? And in fact, brands work on this principle. You'd see that on the name of this article. So amazing research article called Attachment and Aversion. You're either attached to brands or you're averse to certain brands. So they create psychological attachment and aversions. And the question then arises that how do you create psychological attachments and aversions in your own career so that people have greater psychological attachment with your brand and minimal aversions? So typically any brand, it could be a person, it could be a product, it could be a service, or it could be you. Any brand has, again, three different E's or three different polarities to build of aversion or of attachment. So there's a positive pole and there's a negative pole. And the three poles are, or the three pillars are as follows. The first is to do with aesthetic and hedonic value. In any particular brand, you would be more attached to that brand that is aesthetically more pleasing, that looks good, that gives you good feelings, that is well designed, etc., etc. So, and that reflects in, the way that you appear, the way that you talk to people, the sort of subjects you talk about, the way that you articulate yourself, the way that you build your relations. So you could be, the positive pole over here is that a brand could be enticing. The negative pole could be that aesthetically the brand could be annoying, and who can be considered, friendly. Okay, so you have to have that sort of a gravitas with you. So that is your feature number one, and these are really, really, impulse features. They are not rational. They are extremely irrational features of yourself when you're trying to set yourself up in a particular career, especially in the career of public policy. Okay, the second feature is that creates affinity for brands is that whether brands give the user a sense of autonomy over their environment. So whether they make you feel enabled or disabled in your environment. So think about, the Swiss knife as a brand just gives you a feeling of greater security. This sort of a thing stems from studies on human beings' egos. Okay, it simply goes to say that who are the people, or which are the brands that give you an ego enhancement. We sort of have egoistic needs. Everybody has egoistic needs, and I'm not just talking about pride. Egoistic needs could be needs for comfort. It could be needs for effectiveness in your environment. It could be needs of belongingness. So your ego is your identity from inside. If you read about psychological literature, you have your, conscious, subconscious, your ego, etc., etc. So typically we go towards brands that enhance our inner egos, in the sense that that give us a greater sense of control over our environment, that make us feel more fulfilled. So for example, if Apple is there as a brand, and if you might remember the earlier advertisements that Apple did, it was showing folks like Albert Einstein and all of these really intelligent people, and associating itself with legendary intellectuals and intelligent people who have changed the world. And somewhere deep down inside our hearts, we all want to associate ourselves. Our ego gets boosted if we think that we are using a brand, or if we are thinking about a brand or associated with a brand that in turn is associated with these features that, or those ideas that boost our ego. We think that we are more knowledgeable by using Apple products, and knowledge gives us greater autonomy over our environment. Or, on the other hand, a Swiss knife gives us a sense of greater autonomy because it has this association of ruggedness, association of being dangerous, or having the ability to do any sort of tasks with that knife, etc., etc. That brand in itself is associated to a lot of those ideas, and that gives you a sense of autonomy over your environment. So all brands are either ego enhancing or ego shrinking. So think of it in personal terms. Think of a politician that you like, and imagine that you are meeting that politician. Okay, and I'm taking politician examples, but I have to say that public policy is not just about politicians. It's about a lot more roles. Politicians are just part of it, but it's easier to understand. So think of a politician whom you really, really like. Okay, for me, it's, for example, Barack Obama. Now, if I imagine myself meeting Barack Obama, I feel that he will talk to me about things that would help me in my life. He would talk to me about things that would give me greater courage. And after I've met him, the social response that I will get from people around me would be that of greater validation. So associating myself with Barack Obama would, or that brand would, give me a great boost of ego enhancement. Okay. On the other hand, I don't know, if I meet a person like Donald Trump, I don't know, he might disrespect me. He might just, pick me on something. He might make me feel smaller as a person. And I might not even get great social validation after meeting him. So, it would shrink my ego. All right. So all of the brands, including people, are either ego enhancing or ego shrinking. And by that, I do not mean, and I absolutely hate it when people do it, that, they are completely, just pandering to the politicians or the bureaucrats, and, even showing that, even agreeing with the things that could be wrong, but just to, just to sort of bolster the ego of the politician or the bureaucrat. I'm not talking about ego in that sense. I'm talking about the fact that your brand should be such that whoever is associated with you leaves more empowered, feels as if you add something, to their sense of control over their environment. So you should be an enabling factor. Okay, that is really, really important for your brand. You come across as a person who can add value, can get things done. It has nothing to do with your real performance, because that is, and ideally your real performance should be stellar. It should be amazing, but it should also be reflected in your brand. Okay. The third thing is that, if this is perhaps, according to various studies, the most relevant factor in increasing brand attachment, which is that if a brand has a good overlap with the user's self-identity or self-expression. Okay, so let us say if Nesu over here considers part of her identity as being, extremely pro sustainability and pro environment. Let us say that, Anisu, and I do feel after speaking to you that that is a part of your identity, that you really deeply care about sustainable development. And if there are things, if you come across another brand that fits very well with your self-identity, you're going to have a greater attachment with that particular brand. And if there is a brand that enhances your self-expression, if there is a brand that says things that you want to say, in fact, that's again, as much as I might not personally like Donald Trump. Donald Trump was saying things that people wanted to say, but they were never really saying it. So he was sort of facilitating people's self-expression. And that's why he became the brand that he became. So any brand that also has a great, overlap with identities and enhances your own self-expression, that brand is likely to have a greater attachment, which means that you should choose very carefully the people you want to work with. You should choose very, ideally you should work with all sorts of people, whether they share your identity. And I love, working and interacting and arguing with people who absolutely are opposed to my identities and values. But I know that the people who are usually going to take me from here to here and from here to here are usually going to be people who have a strong affinity to my brand, which means that I'm going to have some sort of an identity overlap with them. All right. So that's your second rule. The third rule is something that I'm going to elaborate a lot about. But until here, I want to hear your thoughts and your questions until the second rule. What are your thoughts, or what are your reflections on whatever we've discussed until now? Anybody, you can unmute yourself. I'm happy to hear your thoughts. You agree with it, you disagree with it, you think it's totally bullshit, or you think that's valuable, I would want to hear, or if you have any particular question.
I have a thing to say, or you can say, I want to clarify one thing.
Sure, Dipanshu.
Is that we talked about low trust culture countries. So you gave example of Elon Musk. So isn't that in many cases it's about personal identity and personal mindset instead of putting everything into one culture? Because talking about some entrepreneurs and many of the people who are from different fields or so-called intellectuals, they do have different sort of mindset, which is
Absolutely.
different from the culture of that particular country. So can we
Yes, so
take
they
it?
are
Yeah.
exceptions. They are exceptions, but the rule in the culture would probably not reflect the values of one or two or a bunch of entrepreneurs. So I think just being sensitive to the overall culture is very, very important over here. That makes sense, Deepanshu.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that any culture is unilaterally. I'm not saying that India is totally a low trust country. There are high degrees of trust under certain contexts in India. But when it comes to consumer behavior, when it comes to buying things, we are a low trust country.
Yeah. Thank you.
Any other thoughts or comments?
It's not much. Oh, someone else on mute? I'm not sure
Yeah,
if I
go ahead.
heard
I can hear
anything.
you. I can hear you, Anis.
Okay. I just on the point of autonomy in the environment, I just thought that was very interesting. It's almost, I don't want to say logical. It doesn't sound like complicated to think how great an effect that would have in creating connections and building trust. And I just like the way you put it, in enabling people through your experience, through your image. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's all.
No, thank you. Thank you. I'm glad you found it useful. Was there anybody else who unmuted themselves? Just when Anesu had started speaking, I'm happy to take your questions or comments.
I would
Sure.
learning your experience about public policy, this like earning bread and butter from this. I believe like public policy has taken a wider role in nowadays and gaining a popularity as a career discipline. But what I personally feel, talking in terms of India, like we know what are the key stakeholders who are being affected by the policy and the main legislators who are actually building upon the policies, thinking about the various domains. But when I talk about this as a career path, it seems to be very vague. Like it's
Yeah,
like from where to start.
exactly. And it is definitely an industry in the making in India. That's why you don't have defined career paths. You have a lot of jobs, and I'll talk about that where you find them. But this is one way to look at the career path, Manik, if that's helpful.
Yeah, because like when you go for sales and marketing, there's a plenty of opportunities
There
you
is a
see.
very clear career path that you're first going to be, an intern, then an area sales manager, then a zonal sales manager, etc., until you become a head of
Yeah.
sales.
And
Yeah.
like everybody needs to understand, like there's a reason public policy is being taught into the world's top colleges. There must be a legit reason. That's why people are
Yeah.
making.
No, absolutely. You're right about that. Albert.
Yeah, so I just wanted to add in a point or two. The first is around the way and manner which one can take a journey through a career in public policy. So I took as a personal experience a more of a technocratic journey. And in countries, in certain countries such as Nigeria, the technocratic perspective becomes advantageous because people that already are in the system have a lot of trappings in terms of like bureaucracy, and so the external perspectives that experts in certain technical fields and disciplines bring to the table becomes sought after. So in terms of like the dynamics of education, experience, exposure, you then would see more of exposure and experience being a lot more important.
Absolutely.
As opposed to education and the like. So that's something I just wanted to point out, that it's a journey that needs to be personal, but at the same time, you need to take note of the fact that your local context matters, your own perspectives and your own experiences, and even education matters. And so, for instance, now taking a public policy.
But if you were to divide, let's say if you had 10 points of legitimacy, how would you divide in the Nigerian context? How much would go to experience, how much to education, how much to exposure?
Okay, so I think I would say a 4 to exposure, a 3.5 to 4 for experience, and a lot less for education. So because for exposure, there's this thing around the fact that exposure in terms of like networks, in terms of your contacts, in terms of access to investment, potential financing, there's so many things exposure brings to developing countries that makes it a lot more attractive in terms of political appointments, positions, and things like that. And then experience, basically now the fact that you are an expert in. So for instance, when COVID-19 struck, the scientists who had the science background but who were based in the policy space became the leading voices everyone had to listen to, right? Because they were the best of both worlds. So I think that's also is some kind of context to help us think about our journeys and how we want to build over time in the sphere of public policy.
Absolutely. So, a lot of times if you have the scientific legitimacy, that I would count it as education. So context-wise, it would change. But, I really, think that out of those 10 points, the way that you distributed them would be the reality of many different countries, many countries around the world. So thank you so much for that, Albert. And when I'm talking about experience, I'm talking about, bureaucracy or being a consultant or being a technocrat, all wrapped into this bucket. So thank you so much. All right. Okay, moving further. So this was more about your trust building, your brand, etc. Now figuring out where, how not to go hungry as a policymaker. That's where I'm getting to now. So over here, again, I have to admit that, when I was in undergrad, I used to be, extremely left-wing in my mindset. And, as they say, that socialist in your 20s. And over time, what you realize is that, you are eventually living in a capitalistic society, and the fundamental, the most prominent transactions that take place in a society which is capitalistic is between a producer and a consumer. And, the consumer is somebody else's producer, the producer is somebody else's consumer. But the essential wealth creation is happening because of the producer and consumer relationship in a capitalistic society. So when the wealth is created by the private sector, thou shalt cultivate and build skills useful for the private sector. Okay? And you will have to do it, no matter how much you love it, how much you hate it. I'll tell you, I'll give you a couple of examples, and also give you my example after that. So a friend of mine, this is not her picture, this is a stock photograph on the left. A friend of mine graduated with a PhD in, and her PhD topic was that, how giving rights of humans to rivers and, forests, etc., that works. Okay, so essentially, like even in India, the court, I think, I'm not sure whether that has happened, but there were talks about the court recognizing the river Ganga as a human being. So if you're polluting the Ganga, etc., it could go to the court, or somebody could go to the court on that river's behalf as if a human being has been violated. So that natural entity has human rights, so to say. So she did her PhD on that, and she was finding it extremely, extremely hard to get a job after that, because there's nobody who's going to employ her. There's no sort of job that she was able to find after this. What did she do? Now she's happily working in a job. She is also part of an advisory board in European Commission. What she really did after that is that she repurposed her CV and she figured out that there are a lot of there's a lot of boom in the tech sector. There's a lot of policy professionals requirement in the tech sector, and she repurposed her CV. Am I audible, guys, or has it frozen? Okay, I'm audible. Great, thanks. So there's a lot of opportunities in tech sector. So she picked up, she highlighted the courses she took related to regulation, related to tech policy, etc., etc. And even though, and again related to ESG, etc. And then started applying to these tech jobs and landed a job. Initially, she did it just so that it could, find her the bread and butter. But now she seemed to have done pretty well at it. She's part of a, UK, Canada tech advisory group, a European Commission tech advisory group, etc., etc. But see over here that, it's the tech industry, and even in India, a lot of policy departments who are hiring public policy graduates are owned by tech or tech applied companies such as your Microsoft, your Uber, your Meta. So, and in fact, a lot of public policy schools are funded by tech companies, because here is an industry which is a mammoth and wants and depends on the government to thrive, and that's why invests in a way, rather than training people in-house, invests in institutions that could train people who could eventually support these industries in getting greater, regulatory, greater regulatory sort of experience in tech. Okay, so Manik, your question is, can we enter into ESG by a degree in MPA? Yes, absolutely, you can do that. You can focus on the environment specialization or focus area, and also do the right sort of additional certifications and licenses that would enable you to be a ESG practitioner. But having an MPA degree is a great route towards that, Manik. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
And feel free to ask me follow-up questions, stop me wherever you want. Okay. The other example is of Nelson Mandela. Been a great fan of this guy. He, I think Anthony Sampson has written a biography of his. I've read his autobiography as well. But one interesting story about Nelson Mandela is that even a person who was as politically accomplished as this guy, and there was nobody who could really question his political credentials. He sacrificed 22 years of his life for fighting apartheid and in jail. But even Nelson Mandela was dependent on private sector investors for the African National Congress, and famously, would hold banquets and dinners for business folks such as Harry Oppenheimer, or with a number of celebrities, etc., etc. And he was even criticized for that. That whether he's really genuine in his heart from the perspective of the benefit towards his people. So imagine a person who has stayed 22 years of his life behind the bars, also has to take criticism, but still has to take support of the private sector for keeping his political agendas alive and kicking. And Nelson Mandela was, he was that brilliant mix of idealistic and pragmatic as a politician. So idealism and pragmatism, you want to see one of the most perfect blends, you'll see it in this guy, did in fact keep the private sector in good stead. And, once there's also this anecdote where, one of his own personal patrons, who was a business person, just moved over to the other side and decided not to fund Mandela anymore. So when his residence was being constructed, it had to be put on hold. And, Mandela complained that, his wife is spending way too much on the residence construction, and they don't have enough money left. So, imagine that a person of that stature also, faces financial issues at the peak of his career after coming out of the prison, etc. So you have to, please don't think that you will be spared by the financial grind. You will have to, organize your finances one way or the other. And the bad way to do it is, I think that's abhorrible, where, people engage in all sorts of corruption with the private sector. I think that is not the way that development can really take place. But the good way to do it is that you cultivate skills that are useful to the private sector and are useful for sustainable development as well. I'm going to talk about that on the next slide very soon. But before that, a couple more examples. The third person you see over here is this guy called Ian Bremer. I hope that some of us over here might have heard about him, but if not, then Ian Bremer heads this organization called the Eurasia Group. It is he's credited to have started this whole industry called political risk management consulting. So Ian Bremer graduated with a PhD from Stanford, was appointed as one of the youngest professors in Stanford, and from there he, within a year or year or so, he resigned and went over to New York. And at New York City, he talked to a lot of investors. This was back in the 80s, and many of the investors were investing in creation of those oil and gas pipelines in Russia. And he said to the investors that, all of the money that you're sending in Russia, if I understand the political context over there, they're never going to pay you back. And the investors were like, this is all a whole bunch of horseshit. Politics is different and commercial relations are different, and they're going to pay back. And lo and behold, 1991 happened, Soviet disintegration happened, and the Russians very conveniently wrote all of their debt off because it was seemingly belonging to the Soviet Union. And all of those investors, they did not get their money back. So Ian Bremer overnight became excessively famous because of that, and became, a coveted consultant for investors, because investors now understood the link between political risk and their returns. And even in India now, there are political risk consultancies which would tell investors that, okay, this state government, which has probably given your factory a lot of tax breaks, is probably not going to be in power in the next term. So you need to be talking to the political party who might come into power in the next term, so that they don't discontinue your tax breaks, etc., etc. So that has developed into a whole new practice, and to a great extent, Ian Bremer is to be credited or blamed for this. But what he did was that he built something that was useful for the investors. I'm going to talk about investors a lot more in the next slide, but another example over here, there's another guy called, in fact, Ian Bremer had also brought in a mentor from his company as at the GPOTS Fellowship in one of our prior cohorts. Another guy, very famous in East Asia, he's of Indian origin, called Parag Khanna. And Parag does a lot of work around political risk management, etc. as well, and had a think tank sort of a thing going, was writing books, was very well known. And recently, I've seen that he has also come up with an AI-based software which accounts for climate risk in various parts of the world. And based on climate risk, political risk, etc., it advises investors on as to where to invest in a particular, region of the world. So what's happening over here, all of, the really successful people are building products which could be useful for investors, or which could be great investments in themselves, or which could be really, really useful for investors in making their investment decisions. All right. And why is that happening? Because investors are the people who have the most amount of money in this world. Investors are the people who are really making the private sector live and thrive. And somebody or the other is going to, get that money from the investors because it is a limited pool. And my suggestion and my idea over here, and what I recommend all of our friends in this room to do, is to come up with sustainable projects or come up with projects that enhance sustainable development goals and chase that money that the investors have. Because if you don't chase that money, then a lot of the people who are with non-sustainable projects or projects that harm our nature and environment and are not socially responsible are going to chase and be successful in raising the investors' money. So my suggestion is that as many of us as possible should make ourselves useful and should make products and services which are useful for sustainable outcomes, and take those products and make them useful for investors. So chase that investor money for good projects. Okay. Now, I'm not going to play this video. It's a whole 21-minute video, but that is just, again, underlining the concept that even in the US, it's not an ideal system. It is, I think, a shitty way to do things. But the fact of the matter is that you have to be involved in fundraising or involved in mustering finances for yourself, for your causes, for your organizations, no matter what level you reach. Senators in the US spend enormous amount of time making calls to donors all throughout the year, even when there's no election. There are examples of vice presidents and former vice presidents reaching out to donors so that they can keep their political agendas, their communities, and their parties thriving. So there's no escaping that. Okay. Now, coming back to the issue of investors, I want to show you this model, which I think is really, really useful, which is that, as I said, that the fundamental relation in our societies or in our economies is between the producer and the consumer. So if you want sustainable outcomes, there are only two ways to change things. Number one is that you can change consumer incentives or values. Okay, so that is that, consumers start demanding sustainable products, or you can change producer incentives and values. Okay, and there is a great challenge in changing consumer incentives and values, especially in developing countries. And the classic example is that of the toothbrush. So on the left over here, you see, a bamboo toothbrush, which is probably going to cost you somewhere around 70 to 100 or even 200 rupees, right, per toothbrush over here. Okay, this is organic, this is recyclable, this is good for the environment, but this would cost you somewhere around 70 rupees. Okay, let's say. And over here, this is a plastic toothbrush. This is not, efficient for the environment. This is probably going to cost you 17 rupees. Now, in a cost-sensitive economy where, large majority of the people don't have a lot of money to spend, no matter how much, gradually the market for this is increasing, and it is increasing at, a good, promising pace. So it is really going up, but a majority of the people are still going to stick to this. No matter how much you tell them that, this is not environment friendly, they're going to stick to this one because it is just cost effective. Okay. So what can you do? The government or various sectors, like the academia or the social sector can either change, and even the media really can either change the values of the consumer or the incentives of the consumer. The value they can change, the media can, through employing mass media, tell the consumers why environment is important, etc., etc. But the academia can come up with technologies, with research that really makes this bamboo product cheaper from 70 rupees, probably bring it down to 20 rupees, right? And that tech and, innovation like that can do. The government can subsidize or give tax breaks to, bringing the cost down for these products. The government can certainly do that. But essentially, all of these other players, whether it is the media or it is the government or it is the social sector or it is the academia or the science or the investors, they are facilitators. The main players are the producers and the consumers. But I want to talk not about the consumers over here. I want to really talk about the producers and the investors over here, because this is the wealth creating body. And currently, most of the wealth creation is happening for unsustainable products. We need to get to the investors. And in systems thinking, there's something called leverage points. So you have limited resources and energy as a policymaker. So what are those really small points where if you expend disproportionate energy, it would really make the whole of the system better? It would have a rub-off effect in the whole of the system. And that, I believe, is the investors. So if we change the investors' values and incentives, that would really, really change the values and incentives for the producers. And that's why you have now things like blended finance, where the government pools in, or things like the Green Climate Fund, etc., pools in some money to cover the risks of other private equity investors. And when you pool in, the government money or the multilateral monies such as the Green Climate Fund, you are suddenly making some of the investments less riskier for the private sector. And when the private sector also jumps into these investments, things start moving on the sustainable front. So, for example, let us say that there is a huge industry of brick kiln manufacturers. So there are a lot of brick kilns in northern India that manufacture bricks, but send out a lot of air pollution into our environmental ecosystem. And there are a lot of laws which have banned it. There are a lot of laws and a lot of policymakers that talk about sustainable alternatives, but those are really, really expensive. So if you drive down the highways, you'll still see a lot of brick kilns just throwing out all of that smoke into the air. Now, the private sector does not invest in making those brick kilns more environmentally friendly, because it's a micro scale industry, and micro scale industries are very unreliable in terms of when they'll pay back. You need a longer term payment horizon, etc., etc. Now, they're riskier. So now when some government or some multilateral fund also comes in with their own money and says that, hey, we will cover through our own money the risks, but you as private sector invest some funds for profit for a longer term into something like this, then two things happen. Number one is that these brick kiln owners now have greater financial capacity to transition over to more renewable sources or more eco-friendly sources. They are also, able to higher quality talent and create more jobs, etc. And the impact on investment just becomes much better. So let's say if there were $100 that we could invest in these micro scale brick kilns versus $100 that we could invest in, let's say, a high-tech IT industry, high-tech IT would be greater returns in a shorter period of time, and brick kilns would be lesser financial returns and over a longer period of time. But when blended finance comes in and the government comes in, or the multilateral money comes in, what really happens is that the private sector now finds it safer and more lucrative to invest in certain things, which eventually fetch them the money, but also have a disproportionate impact on our climate and environment. So now you have a lot of people doing evaluation projects, or even, I know environment experts or, philosophers, etc., joining the boards of banks or joining the boards of these investment funds to advise them, or consultants doing projects of analyzing various organizations which are sustainable or not. And those are usually the ESG, consultants, or the DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion consultants, who would work for the investors to evaluate companies and, create norms which enable these companies to get investments just because they follow the ESG and the DEI norms. And those, I believe, are great careers to look at. So any sort of careers that are changing producer incentives for the better, are facilitating investors in making more responsible investments, I think those are the careers which would have a lot of financial potential for policymakers in the future. Okay, but in addition, the bottom line remains that you will have to plug yourself into an industry which keeps your financial equation stable. All right. Any questions or thoughts until here? Then we have just one more lesson to go with, and then I'll talk about GPOTs and take more of your questions. But until now, what are your thoughts? What are your comments? You agree with this? You don't agree with this? Happy to hear. But does this make sense? Let me see. Aditi, Ruchi, Archie, anybody?
Hello.
Hi.
So I just wanted to say I do agree with your perspectives. That's one thing which is constant is change, and with regards change to human values, behavior patterns, thinking processes, those are things that we can always bet on transitioning from one form to another. So it then makes sense to plug ourselves into careers or professions that allow you work ahead of that change. So that rather than being influenced by the change, you are part of the ecosystem now driving that change and telling people how to think, what to think, and how much of what they think should matter, right? So I do agree with your perspectives, and I just wanted to say thank you for all of that insight.
Thank you. I'm glad that you find it valuable, Albert. All right, so I think this is just 2 more points over here. Really, number one is that thou shall not be naive or gullible. And what I mean by that is that a lot of times you'll find, especially when you're in that struggling phase, trying to set up a name for yourself in the field, that a lot of people might just try to free ride on your talent, or just might give you grand promises that they may not fulfill. So don't chase madly after grand promises. And if you read the story, the autobiography of Benjamin Franklin, this lesson becomes really, really clear. So Benjamin Franklin obviously was, one of the founding fathers who drafted the Constitution, who signed on to the Declaration of Independence, etc., in the USA, and was a celebrated inventor, was a diplomat. He did a number of things and was extremely accomplished and celebrated. He was actually one of the prime co-founders of the University of Pennsylvania, which now is an Ivy League university. Franklin did not have any formal education, and he actually, his father was, he had a printing press, and he was an apprentice under his brother. But eventually he had a falling out with his brother, so he ran away from his house in Boston and went over to Pennsylvania with, almost penniless, and started working at another person's printing press. Now, over there, what Franklin found was, he was really having a hard time, just working for others and, working for really low wages, etc. But one day, one of his relatives, I think he was his sister's husband was visiting. He was a captain in the military, and he met Benjamin Franklin, and he introduced him to the governor of Pennsylvania. The governor of Pennsylvania was a really tall figure, as you can imagine, in the state of Pennsylvania, and he told Franklin that, hey, you should keep visiting me. And Franklin was very articulate, he was very well read, etc., even though he was not formally educated. So Franklin would now start going to the governor's place almost on a daily basis, to meet with visitors, to attend luncheons and dinners, etc. And one day the governor said that, hey, all of the printing work of the Pennsylvania legislature, I'm going to give it to you if you go and convince your father to set up a printing press, which dedicatedly is for you, and you can head that printing press. I'm giving you guaranteed business. And I'm writing this letter to your father, which you can take back to him and ask him to do that. So he went to his father and showed that letter, and his father said that, no, you're too young, and do not trust the word of high and mighty politicians, etc., etc., and more or less you're just not qualified for it right now. Okay, so just give me a second, guys. I'm gonna get the door and continue with this. We'll probably just wrap this up in 5 minutes. Sorry about that. So what Franklin did was that he came back empty-handed, but with the blessings of his father this time, but came back empty-handed. And, to the governor, he said that, my father would not fund my venture. So the governor said that, okay, I am going to fund your venture. You have to go to England, to go to London from Pennsylvania. I'm going to write you the letters of credit so you can go to Pennsylvania and show those letters of credit, go to London and show those letters of credit, and they will give you the best of the equipments which are there to set up a printing press, etc., etc. You come to me with a budget. So Franklin came to him with a budget, and there was a date which was assigned where the ship would leave from Pennsylvania to London, and Franklin was waiting for his letter of credit. He went to the governor multiple times for the letter of credit. Sometimes the governor was unavailable, he was busy, etc., etc. And his secretary then told him that you board the ship on that day whenever it is leaving, and we'll send the letter of credit directly onto that ship. So Franklin got onto that ship, and he was awaiting the letter of credit, and the word was sent that the governor is sending in a lot of various letters for various works in England, and one of the letters in that bag, which will have all of the other letters, will also have that letter of credit. So the captain will give him that bag after the ship sails, and the ship sailed, the captain then showed him that, okay, there is the bag, you can check whether it has your letters of credit, etc. Franklin looked into the bag, it had all of the other letters, but not his, and the ship had sailed to England, and Franklin hardly had any money. He probably thought, then he was told by the captain that you meet the postmaster general over there in London, and he might give you the letter of credit. But he waited and waited for weeks in London, but did not get the letter of credit at all. And he later on learned that the governor had this sort of he was infamous for making tall promises to people and not following through on those promises. Eventually, Franklin got a job in England and in a printing press, and came back and set up a good press for himself. But the idea over here is that a lot of times some people could be, especially if you're in politics, you're making so many promises that even if you want to, you cannot keep track of all of them. And then a lot of politicians are just in the habit of making false promises, as the saying goes. And I'm not saying that you always become cynical of politicians, but just be cautious. As the saying goes that, if they say, if he or she says yes, then it's a maybe as a politician. If a politician says maybe, then it is no. And if a politician says no, then he or she is not a politician at all. So, no, don't be naive. And I have also faced similar things where, not with politicians really, but with other folks who are much senior than me, and they would get a lot of free work done by me, and in the hopes that I would eventually get something. But I don't blame all of them. I'm good friends with some of them even now. But don't always be super gullible. That's what I mean to say. So in fact, just one last personal example, that there was this guy that I met in a Middle Eastern country, and he was this great business facilitator, investment professional, and he sort of promised me that, okay, I'm going to get businesses in India a lot of investments if they come over here and set up in the UAE. And after a while, I saw this guy just reaching out to me with UAE companies trying to raise funds from India, and I began helping him, thinking that, okay, this is going to be a reciprocal sort of thing. But eventually what happened was that I found myself helping him out, raising funds for his companies, but the promise of taking Indian companies over there and raising funds from them was never fulfilled. So you should always verify and do something for the other, then let them do something for you, and then do some more for the others, and then let them do something for you. That's how trust builds. Generally do a lot of work without expecting returns, but when you're expecting returns, just move incrementally so that you don't regret it later on. So that's just one thing that I want to say. And the last thing is that you shall think small first and then think of a large institutional change, which means that a lot of times as public policy practitioners, when we think about public policy problems, we think of it from the perspective that, let us build a, if I give that example with the experience of Muhammad Yunus, who is again a Nobel laureate from Bangladesh, and he started a micro-lending institution later on that turned into Grameen Bank, really famous for elevating people out of poverty, from poverty. But how he started was that outside of his university in Dhaka, he saw people who were really poor and they were exhausting all of their income before the month ended. Okay, so he gave them some personal loans, petty loans, so that on the condition that he would not charge any interest, but he would give it to small groups, that only when everybody in the group has returned the loan, they would be able to get a second round of loans over there. Okay. Let me just read Ria's comment that is such an important point. As a PhD candidate, I've sometimes focused on the larger picture first in terms of I need to redirect to smaller steps. Absolutely, Ria. So finishing on this story of Muhammad Yunus, imagine, if he started with the idea that, okay, if people run out of their income before the 30th of the month, then we should have a bank set up that would give them microfinance. Had he started thinking like that from an institutional perspective that will solve personal problems, he would have not gotten to anywhere. But what he did was that he solved somebody's personal problems. Okay. And what he also did was that he would create groups, and only when one person who has received the loan pays back will the second person receive the loan. So each person would take responsibility for the other. So he created those systems for individuals first, and that grew, that blew up into what we know as Grameen Bank. And I make this mistake all the time, Leah, that when I look at a particular problem, the first instinct is that, okay, how can we change the whole policy to, address this particular problem? Or how can we set up a whole institution that would just monitor and, take care of this problem? And I think that, those are ideas which are great, but the pathway to reach them is inverted, which means that we need to solve private individuals' problems first. And once you do that, it sort of spirals onto larger policy changes or setting up of institutions, et cetera, et cetera. But somehow when we learn public policy, are more, theoretical and less practical. Actually, I don't think that there's a serious dichotomy between theoretical and practical, but just so that I can explain it to you better, I'm just saying that a lot of times our theoretical mind forgets about practical realities. And that's when we think about large scale changes first, and then they will address the smaller scale changes. Should think the other way around. We should think about the private individual and take it from there. So that is it from my side on this. Happy to take your questions and comments. And then after that, we'll probably spend about 10 minutes discussing about the GPOTS fellowship. So I open it out for discussion now.
It's a very insightful discussion. I learned a lot. So, talking about the investor thing, can I talk about it? It was a previous section.
Yes.
So I find it very unfortunate that some of the investors, because of their personal biases, do invest in some of the organizations or media channels to promote a narrative in the society, which may or may not be good for that culture and the nation. Yes. That's my comment.
No, you're absolutely right. And that frustrates me to no end as well. But I think the problem is that we have to understand that the investors are looking for more money, and they are looking for media channels that would give them greater viewership. And greater viewership often comes with sensationalism, right? Now, the innovation would be to think about ways in which you can create a sensational media channel, let us say a really sensational media channel that promotes sustainable issues, that promotes sustainable development. It makes the money because that's how investors are going to invest. They're not going to invest without the prospect of profits eventually. But there's nobody who says that profits can only come through investing in socially undesirable objects. And that's what I'm saying. If not enough good people are chasing resources, then the bad people are going to run away with all of the resources which are available.
Yeah, that's a great insight. Thank you.
I don't know, Leah, do you want to talk about that last point that we were discussing as to what typically happens? You might want to unmute yourself. Okay, I already see Leah's comment. I was wondering if you had any insight or advice in terms of working within a policy sphere that is politically contentious. Leah, would you want to elaborate on that a little bit, please?
Certainly, thank you very much. So for myself, being in Northern Ireland, there are many areas of public policy which tend to suffer from what we would say political paralysis, and not actually, making it through the legislative process or any type of scrutiny, because they are deemed to be politically contentious, particularly in areas of minority or cultural rights. So specifically minority languages, which is what I'm exploring in my PhD.
Yeah.
And as I'm undertaking my PhD, I'm having different ideas about policy proposals around legislative models, what that should look like, what the political strategies should look like as well. And it's something I'm very interested in, but I know already that it'll be very difficult for me to try to pursue a career in that post my PhD because of the political landscape here. Yeah. And I was just noticing, like, in your session, you talked about that importance of networking as well. And I was wondering if you had any guidance around how best to address, you know, those issues that do need to have maybe policy revisitation, but you're already aware that the stakeholders you need to approach might be in opposition to the idea because of their political agendas.
Sure. So there are probably 3 or 4 things that I'll say to that. Number one is, in fact, I'm going to share my screen really quickly. And this is something that we cover in a workshop at GPODS. It's actually a model from my systems thinking professor from Cornell, is that when you're trying to convert people to a particular agenda, you would find 4 types of people. This is called the Nfst model. You'd find people who are naysayers, who are opposed to your agendas. Then there are going to be fence sitters, who are, not for you, but not against you. They are still, judging and understanding, etc., etc. Then there are supporters who, buy into your agenda. And then there are thought leaders who actually get the deep values behind that particular agenda. And you need to figure out various strategies to align, these different stakeholders. So thought leaders, as they say, you love them. Basically, get them to drive the agenda, get them to take the driver's seat, the leadership position, co-opt them inside of your core team to promote that agenda. So that's what the thought leaders do. And they're doing it for intrinsic purposes. They're not doing it for extrinsic purposes over here. Then to the supporters, you need to give them positive, reinforcements and rewards. These could be, tangible and financial rewards, but these could also be intangible recognitions. So supporters, they are in with your agenda, but then they also need some sort of, intrinsic or extrinsic reward to be, not intrinsic. These are the intrinsic ones, the thought leaders. The supporters, they need, some sort of a reward or recognition to be there with you. And then with the fence sitters, you don't give them any rewards or incentives, either positive or negative. Because if you're giving them positive rewards, then you're sort of rewarding them to sit on the fence. But if you're giving them negative rewards, then they would quickly jump on from this group to that group, right? So that's why a lot of people, for example, who don't understand gender rights, they're not opposed to it, but they're just probably sitting on the fence. If you ridicule them for their lack of understanding, they're going to go to the other extreme. So what you do with the fence sitters is that you show them party pictures. You show them that if they come over here and become your supporters, then they will be able to get all of these rewards that there are. Okay, these could be social validations, these could be recognitions, these could be all those different sort of rewards. Show them party pictures that if you come over here, then this is what you do. Now, to naysayers, there are a lot of different strategies. And, we go into a lot of discussion in this particular workshop that we have with the fellowship discussing that. But yeah, I hope that makes sense. But then you need to get into concepts of game theory, which we discuss in the fellowship, and you need to build a lot of networks. I actually want to show you all this as well, that at GPODS, building networks and of people who are in key decision-making positions is really at the heart of the fellowship. So we invite about 40 mentors who are global leaders in each of the cohorts. So as you can see, they're going to be academics who are from some of the top universities in the world. A lot of times, they would give you great guidance into applying for universities. Some of the people have also written recommendation letters for applicants earlier. We have a lot of people who want to apply for great universities. And I have written recommendation letters and people have gotten into great colleges after that. So you have, academics, you have, people who are from these industry associations, such as Shelley Brunswick, who's the CEO of Space Foundation. You've got people from the UN. So, for example, Marco, who's going to be a mentor this time, he's the Chief of Division on Innovation and Strategies for UNIDO, United Nations Industrial Development Organization. Then you have, again, academics such as John Calabrese, who's a professor of international relations at the American University. Again, more UN folks. Then you have a number of bureaucrats. You have, folks who are at literally, war fronts, such as Dimitro over here, who is the chairman of the Kiev School of Diplomatic Arts, and you'll be hearing directly from him. You have folks from NATO. You have investors. Jonathan over here is part of the UN South-South Cooperation. Deeksha over here is the Chief Sustainability Officer of one of the largest Indian companies, Aditya Birla Group. Then you have folks like John Osterman, who are in the US defense bureaucracy. And then you have, folks like Mahesh over here, who's India country director of the Acumen Fund, which is, again, an investment fund that invests in sustainable projects. So it's a sustainable investment fund. And you have political risk management folks. So you have all of these really amazing people coming in as mentors. And what also happens is that once you're part of the GPOTS program, even after you graduate as an alum, we have a very solid alum network, and every day we get photos of an alum, meeting a mentor if they happen to visit that particular city or town. In fact, I'm meeting Jagannath Panda this weekend, and I saw some alum meeting another of our mentor, having beer with him in Pennsylvania a couple of days ago. But what also happens is that after you graduate and, let's say there is a mentor who's coming in another cohort that you haven't really gotten the chance to interact with. So, such as, let's say if in a future cohort you have Justice Michelle coming over and you want to interact with her, you can attend all of the future fellowship interactions for no extra cost. So essentially for GPOTS, you only pay once, and after you graduate, you can attend all of our cohorts for free throughout your lifetime. So which means that you could keep building these networks infinitely. And this will be a 7th cohort, and you'll see a lot of alums also attending these mentorship lectures by your side. And these alums are also from great universities and studying in great universities right now, or doing great projects right now. I can probably show you some of the earlier fellows over here. It's probably the internet, which is going to take us some time to go to the fellows page. But, oh yeah, we have it. Okay, so you have, for example, Tavis, he is at the NUS. You've got, this guy is from one of the IIMs. Got a number of people getting into great universities after our program. And as you can see that, our fellows are from all over the world. Ameya over here has recently joined the IR program at the Johns Hopkins University in DC. So our alums go on to, do some amazing work as well. So you will be part of, an ever increasing, IPSA has joined LSE recently. And from the first cohort, Caroline went to Harvard and then went to George Washington University. We've had alums who've gone into Columbia, etc., etc. So you will learn in a very international environment with very inspiring people as your cohort mates and as mentors. And in addition to that, what you will also do is that you will be speaking in panels. So this time we are doing a panel discussion with UN Habitat, where we will have our fellows speak in those panels. So we will put you out there, and the attendees would be a lot of your mentors, a lot of people in the think tanks, a lot of relevant stakeholders listening to you and your thoughts. We also help you get published. So one of our major efforts is to really get you into those ecosystems and platforms where your voice is heard and you are positioned as experts. In fact, what we also do is that at a later stage, we invite some of our fellows to also join us as mentors as the time goes. So, that's the program. In addition to, the networking and the mentorship aspect, we have courses as well over here. We offer 3 courses. One is in comparative public administration, one is in international political economy and diplomacy, and another is in global commons. So these are 3 20-hour-long courses, which also gives you a dipstick view of how graduate level courses are. So if you're applying, and even if you are a graduate student, this would give you a great flavor of some of these graduate level courses, and enhance your knowledge about the subject, and also give a credible signal if you're applying that you can handle graduate education. Because on the other side of decision making about admissions, especially because we get 2 types of candidates usually at GPOTS. Number 1 are who are applying to programs, and number 2 are who are young professionals who have graduated from some of the great policy, diplomacy, sustainability programs. So for those who are applying, people really see that will you be able to handle graduate level coursework, and GPOTS, if you've done that, then you can show that, okay, I've already taken some graduate level courses. We also do workshops. These are usually for making you more employable, more in terms of skill building. So as I said, that you have a policy writing and communication lab where we teach you editing skills, writing skills, also help you get published. You also have a capstone project. That's the only graduating requirement. That's a 5-page paper that you write on addressing a particular policy problem. So that also becomes sort of a research piece, which is not too onerous. It's just 5 pages. So that's that. But in terms of skills, we also teach you fundraising, because that's always important, both from a private sector perspective and from an NGO fundraising perspective. We also do systems thinking and case studies in public policy, where we teach you certain frameworks, and then we let you apply those frameworks to real life cases in the world, which could be complex. Okay. And then we also have program design and impact evaluation workshop, because that is also becoming from an employment perspective. In fact, we did focus group discussions at Davos at the World Economic Forum, and we identified these themes of the workshops, because we asked leaders that what are going to be the skills that's going to make people employable in these fields. So these are the skills that came out on top, and we teach these skills as part of our program as well. So that's our program. Our application deadline is October 10th. So please, keep that deadline in mind. If you face any challenge in, filling out your application, you only need 2 documents to fill your application. One is your CV, another is a brief statement of purpose, and out of which statement of purpose is the more important document. It can be just a 1-page statement of purpose. If you face any difficulties, you could contact us on info@gpots.org, and we will very quickly get back to you. You can also add me on LinkedIn, etc. And I'm, unknowingly approachable. I'm always there to talk to people, to help you out with thinking through your careers or your academic pursuits. So always happy to do that. And just in general, very happy to support you. GPOTS comes with a substantial cost. In Indian rupees terms, the tuition fee is 1 lakh INR, but we split it into various installments, and we give partial fee waivers as well, depending on your candidature. So those could range from 15% of the fee to 50% of the fee. In dollar terms, it translates into about $1,600, somewhere about that. You can find those details on the website. But again, we do give partial scholarships, and we understand that, especially if you're still students, you would need that extra, tuition support. So we also split it up into installments, etc. But as we say that once you're a fellow at ZPods, you're really not in it for 3 months, you're in it for a lifetime. And people don't believe it initially, but eventually, you come out making some really strong relations with some of the mentors and a lot of the fellows. And eventually those relations grow over a period of time. So I hope that was helpful, and I hope that you would apply to our program, and I hope that you found this discussion useful. Thank you so much, and have a nice day ahead, or have a nice evening, have a nice meal, and let's stay in touch. Thank you so much. And I look forward to receiving your applications to our program, and feel free to reach out. Thank you. All the best. Bye-bye.